They hold each other's paws while sleeping in the open ocean, so the current doesn't separate them during the night. At first glance, it looks like nothing more than a tender scene. One of those images that goes viral because it seems too sweet to be real. And yet it is real. Sea otters float on the ocean, clinging to one another, or wrapping themselves in giant kelp strands so they don't drift apart while they rest. That floating formation is known as a raft. And yes, it is one of the most moving scenes in the animal world. But behind that tenderness lies something far greater than most people imagine. We are not looking at just an adorable animal. We are looking at an insatiable predator, an ecological engineer, a key piece of a system that holds entire underwater forests together. We are looking at a small creature that, without exaggeration, helps keep the ocean alive. A sea otter, over the course of its lifetime, protects kelp forests that capture enormous amounts of carbon, shelter thousands of species, and buffer the deterioration of coastal ecosystems. When the otter disappears, sea urchins multiply. When urchins multiply, they devour the algae. When the algae disappears, the underwater forest disappears with it. And when the forest goes, a part of the ocean goes dark. That is why this story is not just about a cute face and enormous eyes. It is about balance. It is about climate. It is about survival. And it is about one of the most fascinating, most intelligent, and most important mammals on the planet. They hold each other's paws while sleeping, so they don't get lost in the immensity of the Pacific. The image looks like a postcard, but that postcard is the cover of a much deeper story. The sea otter sleeps floating on its back, sometimes alongside one other otter, sometimes alongside several dozen, sometimes alongside hundreds. If alone, it will often wrap itself in a strand of kelp, as if pulling a vegetable blanket over itself. The algae keeps it anchored. The current doesn't carry it away, and sleep doesn't end in drift. It is a simple solution, elegant, effective, and profoundly beautiful to watch. But beauty is never the center of this story. The center is what that beauty conceals. The sea otter uses tools, not accidentally, not once, not by chance. It does so regularly, deliberately, and repeatedly. It searches for a stone of the right size and shape, places it on its chest while floating, and uses it as an anvil or a hammer to crack open shells, snails, clams, mussels, and carapaces too hard to open with teeth alone. Among non-primate mammals, very few use tools with that level of consistency. The sea otter is among them, and it doesn't just use any stone. In many cases, it chooses a favorite. It stores it in a kind of natural pocket, a fold of skin under the foreleg. There it can carry food and its tool together. Some individuals have been observed using the same stone for months, even years. It is not just an object. It is a personal instrument, something chosen, preserved, and reused. Otters exist across much of the world. There are 13 recognized species, and they are found on every continent except Australia and Antarctica. From the small clawed Asian otter, which can weigh just 1 or a few kilograms, to the giant river otter of the Amazon, which can approach 1.8 meters in length. But the sea otter occupies a category of its own. Within the mustelid family, it is the one that took aquatic life the furthest. It almost never sets foot on land. It eats in the water, sleeps in the water, mates in the water, gives birth in the water, raises its young in the water. Its world is not the coastline, its world is the sea. And to live there, it developed one of the most extraordinary adaptations in the animal kingdom. Its fur is the densest of any mammal. It can have up to 100,000 or even 150,000 hairs per square centimeter. To put that in perspective, a human being typically has around 100,000 hairs on the entire head. A sea otter can have more than that in a tiny patch of its body. That density is not a luxury, it is its survival system. Unlike seals, walruses, or whales, the sea otter has no thick layer of subcutaneous fat to insulate it from the cold. It has no internal coat of that kind. It replaces it with air. The air trapped between the hairs of its fur creates a thermal barrier so effective that freezing water never reaches the skin. It is a dry suit made of hair, a miracle of evolutionary engineering. That means fur care is not a matter of hygiene. It is a matter of life and death. The otter spends hours grooming, rubbing, combing, fluffing, cleaning, rearranging again. It needs to maintain that perfect weave to preserve the layer of air that protects it. If the fur becomes contaminated with oil, industrial grease, or any substance that destroys that structure, water penetrates to the skin, the insulation disappears, and hypothermia begins almost immediately. That is why an oil spill is a catastrophe for a sea otter. It does not need to poison the animal to kill it. Ruining the fur is enough. An animal soaked in crude oil loses the ability to retain heat, enters metabolic crisis, and can die within hours if not rescued. The image of an otter covered in oil is not just heartbreaking, it is the image of a death sentence. The sea otter's fur is so efficient that it allows the animal to maintain a body temperature close to 37 degrees Celsius in waters that can hover around 4 degrees without any insulating fat. But this solution comes at an enormous price. A ferocious metabolism, keeping the body warm in cold water, burns a staggering amount of energy. That is why a sea otter needs to eat between a quarter and nearly a third of its body weight every single day, sometimes more. A pregnant or nursing female can approach 35%. Translated to human scale, it would be as if a person weighing 70 kilograms had to consume between 17 and 20 kilograms of food daily just to keep functioning. Every day, without rest, without weekends, without margin. Hunting for the otter is not an occasional activity. It is a constant obligation. It can spend 5 or more hours a day searching for food. Sea urchins, mollusks, crabs, mussels, small octopuses, sea stars, fish, abalone when any remain. Whatever it finds that provides energy. We watch it float with apparent calm, but that adorable body lives on the edge of a permanent physiological demand. 2 days without enough food can be disastrous. Even the choice of stone follows a logic. For hard shells, a flatter and heavier stone. For certain spiny or awkwardly shaped prey, one with the right edge. Researchers have observed individual preferences. Some otters show remarkable precision in selecting, carrying, and using their tools. They do not strike randomly. They match technique and object to the type of prey. The river otter, for its part, is another kind of formidable hunter, less famous than its marine cousin, but equally impressive. Underwater, it can move quickly, maneuver in strong currents, and detect fish in conditions of near zero visibility. Its vibrissae, the sensitive whiskers on its muzzle, pick up tiny vibrations in the water. A hidden fish, a brief flicker of a fin, a minimal disturbance in the current. Where we see only murky water, an otter sees information. The raft of otters is not just a pretty scene, it is a social structure. Females with pups can group together. Males sometimes form separate aggregations. In some locations, rafts of hundreds of individuals have been observed. Holding paws helps prevent dispersal. Wrapping in kelp serves as an anchor. Sleeping close together reduces heat loss. Being together increases vigilance. More eyes, more noses, a greater chance of detecting danger. A lone otter can also sleep safely, but it must solve the problem of waves and drift another way. So it finds a strand of algae and wraps itself in it. The scene looks almost childlike, nearly comic, as if it were tucking itself in for a nap. But it is a perfectly functional decision. The ocean does not forgive distraction. What looks like tenderness from the outside is pure strategy from within. Sleeping linked together also reduces energy expenditure. Physical contact helps conserve temperature, especially in cold water. Mothers hold their pups on their chests, sometimes for hours, sometimes while floating, eating, or grooming. A small pup cannot simply let go and trust that everything will be fine. It still depends on its mother for almost everything. The sea otter typically gives birth to a single pup, directly in the water, and that pup is born with a fur coat so dense and so filled with air that it floats like a cork. It is a marvel of adaptation. During the first weeks, the pup is practically unsinkable. That allows the mother to briefly leave it on the surface while she dives to find food. But that buoyancy has a limit. The pup cannot fend for itself. If the mother takes too long, the small animal emits insistent, high-pitched cries that function as a sonic beacon. I am here. Come back. Don't leave me. She hears. Even underwater, she returns, repositions the pup on her chest, cleans it, turns it, grooms it. The bond between a sea otter and its pup is extraordinarily tight. The pup depends on its mother for months. It learns where to search for food, how to open prey, how to use a stone, how to groom its fur, how to sleep safely, how to read the rhythm of the sea. None of that comes fully assembled. A large part of an otter's life is learned, and that means something important. Among otters, there is something resembling a local culture. Different populations may use different techniques for processing food or prefer certain prey. A mother teaches by example. The pup watches and repeats. It does not receive only genes. It receives a behavioral repertoire. That is why an orphaned pup is one of the most delicate patients a rehabilitation center can receive. It is not enough to feed it. It has to be taught how to be an otter. It has to learn to maintain its fur in proper condition. It has to be introduced to water without becoming dependent on human beings. Something extremely difficult has to be achieved, saving it without domesticating it. Caregivers work under strict protocols. They minimize direct contact. In many programs, they wear masks, visors, protective clothing, visual barriers, and use feeding methods that prevent imprinting. An otter that becomes too accustomed to human presence may struggle once it returns to the ocean. It might approach people, boats, or dangerous areas instead of seeking out other otters and developing normal, wild behaviors. In some specialized centers, orphaned pups are raised by adult females unable to return to the sea, who serve as surrogate mothers. That system has saved lives. The adults teach things that no human can transmit in the same way. How to move, how to groom at the right frequency, how to manipulate objects, how to respond to live prey, how to think like an otter. But the sea otter is not the only one that deserves attention. The giant otter of South America is an animal that seems to belong to another category entirely. It can measure up to 1.8 meters and weigh more than 30 kilograms. It lives in rivers and lakes of the Amazon basin and is so vocal, so active, and so social that its presence rarely goes unnoticed. It has been called the river wolf, and not without reason. Giant otter families live in stable groups, typically made up of a breeding pair and several young of different ages. They are diurnal, which already sets them apart from many other otter species, and they maintain a wide vocal repertoire: growls, barks, whistles, shrieks, contact calls, alarm signals. A group can be heard from a great distance. They do not move like silent shadows. They move like a family in constant conversation, and they are not timid with intruders. If a caiman enters their territory or threatens the young, several otters may harass it together. They mob it, bite it in vulnerable spots, force it to retreat. A reptile capable of overpowering many other animals may prefer to withdraw from a coordinated band of fast, relentless predators, not because any individual is enormous, but because they act as a group. That cooperative behavior extends to raising young. Older pups help with the smaller ones. They watch over them, accompany them, participate in defense. The family is a real unit of work and survival. In giant otters, social life is not a secondary detail, it is the very structure of success. But if there is one discovery that turned the sea otter into a legendary species in ecology, it was not its tenderness or its intelligence. It was its role in what is called the trophic cascade. The idea is simple, but its consequences are immense. Along many coasts of the North Pacific, the sea otter feeds on sea urchins. Urchins feed on kelp. Kelp forms underwater forests. Those forests provide shelter, food, and nursery grounds for fish, crustaceans, invertebrates, and marine mammals. If the otter disappears, urchins explode in numbers. If urchins explode in numbers, they strip the kelp bare. If the kelp disappears, the forest becomes an underwater desert of rock and spines. A sea otter can eat dozens, and in times of abundance, even close to 100 or more urchins in a single day. Each urchin consumed is one less, eating away at the base of the algae. When otters are present, the forest has a chance. When they are absent, urchins can blanket vast stretches of the seafloor and leave behind a nearly empty plain. During the 20th century, in areas where otters had been eliminated by hunting, enormous expanses of kelp forest disappeared. Not because of a storm, not because of a disease, not because of direct chemical disturbance. They disappeared because the predator that kept herbivores in check was gone. When otters began to return in some places, the kelp returned as well. It was not a coincidence. It was a clear ecological relationship. Kelp forests are among the most productive ecosystems on the planet. They grow quickly. They create structure. They buffer wave energy. They shelter thousands of species. They capture carbon. They produce oxygen. They are to the coastal ocean what a great forest is to the land. And part of their stability depends on a creature that fits comfortably floating on its back with an urchin on its chest. The ecologists who studied this relationship transformed the way we understand ecosystems. The sea otter became one of the most famous examples of a keystone species, a species whose presence has a disproportionate effect on the system as a whole, not because it is the most abundant, not because it is the largest, but because its function supports many others. Put another way, removing a sea otter does not simply mean losing one animal. It means loosening a piece of the architecture of the ocean, and that architecture touches the climate as well. When kelp forests thrive, they absorb carbon dioxide. Part of that biomass ends up sinking or becoming incorporated into processes that store carbon for long periods. That is why, by indirectly protecting the kelp, the sea otter becomes an unexpected ally in the fight against climate change. It is not the solution on its own, but it is part of the solution. A small predator helping to preserve a vast biological machine. Science has tried to measure that effect. The calculations vary depending on the region and the density of kelp, but the general message is clear. Restoring sea otter populations contributes to restoring underwater forests. And those forests help capture more carbon than they would if the seafloor were dominated by urchins. It is a chain of benefits that starts with a furry little muzzle and ends in global chemistry. And here appears one of the great ironies of natural history. The same animal that was slaughtered for centuries because of its fur is today seen as a living tool of ecological restoration, because the fur of the sea otter was precisely its downfall. During the 18th and 19th centuries, Russian, European, and later American hunters pursued sea otters for the exceptional quality of their pelts. When expeditions reached the Aleutian Islands and other regions of the North Pacific, they found immense populations, hundreds of thousands of animals. The resource seemed inexhaustible. It was not. Commercial hunting was merciless. In little more than a century and a half, a population once counted in the hundreds of thousands was reduced to a few thousand scattered across isolated fragments of coastline, barely sufficient to sustain a recovery. By the early 20th century, the sea otter was on the verge of total collapse. Small groups survived, hidden in difficult terrain, scarcely enough to hold the species together. In 1911, an international agreement halted the slaughter and restricted the trade that was pushing the species toward extinction. It was a historic step, one of the first major marine conservation pacts. Without that decision, it is entirely possible that today we would know the sea otter only through photographs, old pelts, and skeletons in museums. Recovery, however, was not fast. An animal that reproduces slowly, depends on specific habitats, and had been persecuted for so long does not rebuild in a decade. It took generations, legal protections, monitoring, science, rehabilitation, and even so, the species has not returned to its full original range. Today, there are around 100,000 or somewhat more than 100,000 sea otters in the world, depending on the source and the subpopulation considered. It is a success compared to the edge of the abyss, but it is still only a fraction of what once existed. And then new threats arrived. In 1989, the Exxon Valdez spill off the coast of Alaska produced one of the most brutal images of the sea otter's vulnerability. Tens of thousands of tons of oil contaminated the sea, and thousands of otters died. Many were found covered in crude, unable to retain body heat. Others died later from physiological effects, malnutrition, or disruption of the ecosystem. Each rescued animal demanded hours of cleaning, thermal stabilization, hydration, and monitoring. It was an exhausting, enormously expensive, and painfully insufficient effort given the scale of the disaster. Washing a contaminated otter is not like washing any other mammal. The crude must be removed without destroying the fur. That extraordinary density of hair must be dried and restored until the air barrier is rebuilt. Temperature, stress, and nutrition must all be stabilized, all while the clock runs against you. Many animals do not survive. Those that do survive thanks to an extraordinary level of intensive care. Despite everything, the recent history of the sea otter is a story of partial recovery and genuine hope. In California, for example, the species was believed extinct until a small group was rediscovered along the coast of Big Sur. That minimal remnant became the origin of a population that today is once again part of the marine landscape. Large groups persist in Alaska. Other populations survive in Russia. It is not a complete restoration, but it is not the disappearance that once seemed inevitable. The relationship between otters and human beings, however, has never been simple. For many people, they are an emblem of conservation. For some fishers, they are competitors. In certain regions, otters enter nets, eat fish from cages, or damage equipment. From the animal's point of view, the situation is straightforward. It has found a convenient food source. From the producer's point of view, the loss can be significant. That is where the conflict arises. It is not resolved by cursing the otter or romanticizing it. It is resolved by understanding the problem and designing measures that reduce harm without destroying the animal. Safer nets, barriers, changes in the location of facilities, compensation schemes, local management. Real conservation rarely consists of posting a beautiful photo and moving on. It consists of negotiating with reality. There is also a human relationship with otters that seems drawn from another era. In parts of Bangladesh, and historically in some areas of China, there existed a tradition of cooperative fishing with otters. Animals raised from a young age would help drive fish toward nets and receive a share of the catch. It is one of the most singular examples of collaboration between humans and a semi-wild carnivorous mammal in a productive context. Today, that tradition has almost completely vanished, but for generations it was a form of shared labor between species. Otters also occupy a special place in the human imagination. They appear in mythologies, stories, and symbols of many peoples. In some European traditions, they are guardians of the river. In East Asian tales, they are associated with water, shape-shifting, or cunning. Among indigenous peoples of the North Pacific coast, the sea otter has been a subject of art, spirituality, and material life. Wherever it has coexisted with people, it has rarely been ignored. And in the age of the internet, that presence became global. Videos of sea otters holding paws while sleeping have accumulated millions of views. Many people first learned about the species through a scene like that. What is interesting is that tenderness, in this case, can become a gateway to conservation. Sometimes an image achieves what a scientific article cannot. It makes someone curious, prompts questions, inspires a donation, leads to reading, generates understanding. But the otter is not exhausted by what is endearing about it. It is also an active mind. Behavioral experiments and field observations show that it is curious, flexible, and capable of solving problems in creative ways. It learns through trial and error, through observation, and through accumulated experience. It changes technique depending on the prey. It explores objects. It persists. It repeats. And it plays. Play in adult animals is a powerful signal. It indicates available time and energy, curiosity, social processing, and in many cases, a brain capable of enjoying something without any immediate practical purpose. Otters play at sliding, chasing each other, manipulating objects, dropping things, and retrieving them. Not every behavior has to be driven by hunger or fear. Sometimes there is also exploration for the pleasure of it. In aquariums and zoos, otters have become notorious for finding the weaknesses in almost any enclosure. They open latches, push their paws through impossible gaps, steal objects from neighboring exhibits, and dismantle routines designed specifically for them. There are records of individuals that learn to shake containers to make food fall out, to disassemble closures built to be more resistant and to imitate human gestures long before anyone attempted to train them formally. They are not small, instinct-driven machines. They are animals with initiative, and that intelligence intersects with social life. Within rafts of sea otters, interest in objects can become competition. Some steal stones from others, not just any stone, the best ones, the ones with the right shape, the ones that strike well. For a long time, this puzzled some observers. Why prefer another otter's stone when there are many others nearby? The answer is that not all stones are equal. Weight, size, texture, and edge matter. A good tool has value. Among the less visible species, the European river otter is one of the great masters of concealment. Many people live near rivers that have otters and have never seen one. They move mostly at dusk, at night, or during quiet hours. They leave few traces, prints in mud, remains of fish, and above all their marking droppings, which carry an enormous amount of chemical information: sex, reproductive status, individual identity, presence. For another otter, that olfactory message is a complete letter. A single river otter may range over many kilometers of watercourse within its territory. It knows pools, eddies, burrow entrances, refuges in root systems, places where fish concentrate in winter. In cold climates, it does not hibernate. It remains active even under ice. It searches for breathing holes, open edges, favorable currents. The cold grants it nothing. It has to keep eating. That is why the presence of otters in a river tends to be a good sign. Not an absolute guarantee, but an important clue. Where there are otters, there is usually relatively clean water, enough fish, banks with shelter, and an ecological network that still functions. They are bioindicators, not because they are fragile in every sense, but because they need many things to be right at the same time. That became clear in the United Kingdom. For decades, agricultural pollution, industrial contamination, and pesticides struck river otters hard. Later, with improvements in water quality and legal protection, populations began returning on their own to many river basins. Their comeback was more than good news for a charismatic species. It was a signal that the system was beginning to heal. The small-clawed otter, the smallest in the world, shows yet another face of this family. It lives in wetlands, mangroves, and rivers of Southeast Asia. It is extraordinarily social. It can live in relatively large family groups and hunt in a coordinated fashion. Its size does not make it irrelevant. On the contrary, it is a precise predator in complex environments where it catches crustaceans, fish, amphibians, and mollusks. The smooth-coated otter has also delivered one of the most remarkable urban surprises of recent years. In Singapore, one of the most densely built cities on the planet, several wild families have recolonized canals and rivers thanks to improvements in water quality. Today, they swim between bridges, parks, and skyscrapers. People follow them, give them names, open accounts to document their movements. The otters, meanwhile, continue doing what they have always done, finding fish and raising their young wherever an opportunity exists. That contrast is striking. A hyper-modern city, and in the middle of it, a family of otters gliding along a riverbank. It is a reminder of something simple and powerful. If the habitat recovers, life returns, sometimes faster than we expect. Of course, not all the stories are about return. The giant Amazonian otter remains under serious pressure. Deforestation, mining, mercury contamination, river alteration, and historical persecution have reduced its populations in many areas. The same is true of several Asian species affected by the destruction of wetlands, illegal trade, and human encroachment. Otters are not out of danger, not even close. In fact, current threats are multiple and act simultaneously: water pollution, destruction of mangroves and riverbanks, accidental entanglement in fishing gear, direct persecution, illegal trafficking as pets, disturbance from poorly managed tourism, spills, changes in prey availability. In the case of sea otters, even increased predator attacks or shifts in ecosystem dynamics can have significant effects on already fragmented populations. And yet, every time we study them more closely, new reasons to be astonished appear. The vibrissae of otters are one of them. Those whiskers are not decorations. They are sensors of extraordinarily high sensitivity, capable of detecting minimal disturbances in water flow. Engineers and biologists have studied their structure to design hydrodynamic sensors for underwater robots and more refined detection systems. In a certain sense, the otter has already solved a technological problem that we are only just beginning to learn to imitate. Modern science has also revolutionized the way we track these animals. Today, it is possible to use GPS tags, transmitters, miniature cameras, genetic analysis, hormonal studies, individual photo identification, and detailed dietary analysis from biological remains. We can know what they eat, how far they travel, where they rest, which routes they use, how they relate to one another, what threats they face, and which conservation measures produce the best results. What were once scattered intuitions can now become maps, patterns, and concrete decisions. And all of that matters because effective conservation depends on detail. It is not enough to know that a species lives somewhere in a certain area. We need to know where it reproduces successfully, where more pups die, what kind of contamination affects the fur, what length of coastline a population needs to expand, where its movements intersect with human activity. Science is not decoration around tenderness. It is the tool that can keep tenderness alive. Let us take a moment to think about a normal day in the life of a sea otter. Off the coast of California or Alaska, dawn breaks. The otter wakes among the kelp. Before searching for food, it begins with what is first and indispensable: the fur. It rubs its muzzle, its cheeks, the back of its neck, its chest. It shakes itself, combs through the hair, fluffs it up. It can spend long minutes dedicated solely to restoring that perfect insulating layer. Then it lifts its head, it sniffs, it looks, it assesses. If it detects no immediate danger, the hunt begins. It dives, it descends to the bottom, it searches among rocks and stalks, it picks up urchins, it pulls mollusks off hard surfaces, it disturbs the sediment, it returns to the surface with prey or with several items tucked into the skin fold. It floats on its back, it places a stone on its chest, it strikes once, twice, 3 times. The shell gives way, it eats, it dives again, and repeats. Hours and hours, again and again. Urchin, mussel, crab, clam, another urchin, another dive, another ascent, another strike. From a distance it looks like a serene life. From within it is a demanding, heavy, and entirely necessary routine. The otter cannot afford to relax too much. The cold charges a toll every minute. By midday, if the area is safe, it rests. It lets itself be carried by the gentle swell, but not entirely, never entirely. It interacts with others, grooms itself again, perhaps cares for a pup, perhaps sleeps a few minutes among kelp strands. The raft rises and falls, the ocean seems calm, but that rest is also a carefully calculated part of the energy balance. Then it hunts again, and as the light flattens over the water toward evening, the routine returns to its starting point. Fur, vigilance, algae, company, sleep, and in many cases, those linked paws that keep the night from carrying each one off in a different direction. For the mother with a pup, the scene is even more intense. She must eat for herself and produce milk. She must maintain her own fur and her pups. She must protect it from predators, from waves, from separation. She must teach it while surviving herself. A mistake, extreme exhaustion, or a bad season can be enormously costly. The pup observes everything: how to hold a piece of prey, how to turn the body to use the chest as a table, how to bite into a shell, how to clean the fur, how to respond to the sea. Every day is a lesson. For months, the mother is not only feeding a pup, she is transmitting a way of being in the world. That level of dependence explains why abandonment or loss of the mother is so devastating. A pup can float, yes, but floating is not living. Living means learning to dive, to search, to crack open, to choose, to conserve heat, to recognize others. Living means becoming a complete otter, and that transformation takes time. It takes long enough that when a pup raised in rehabilitation finally returns to the ocean, Those who cared for it over months described the moment as a mixture of relief, pride, and vertigo. The gate opens. The water is ahead. The animal enters. Sometimes it hesitates for a second. Sometimes it doesn't. It moves away. It no longer belongs to the center, nor to the hands that saved it, nor to the safe space that sustained it. It belongs to the sea again. That is the goal. That it stops needing us. Conserving a species like the sea otter is decided both in those individual moments and in large-scale landscape processes. It takes rescuing one specific pup, and it also takes protecting an entire coastline. It takes cleaning one river, and it also takes reducing the risk of another massive spill. It takes studying one local population, and it also takes understanding the full trophic web. That is why the otter is so powerful as a symbol, because it connects scales, from the tiny paw gripping another paw during sleep, to the underwater forest capturing carbon across kilometers of coast, from the whisker detecting a minimal current, to the international policy deciding whether a shoreline is protected or degraded, from the pup crying on the surface, to a planet that needs more stable ecosystems. For millions of years, otters have done what they do without asking our permission. They have dived, hunted, taught their young, slept in rafts, traveled rivers, marked banks, competed for a better stone, escaped predators, and played. We were the ones who interrupted that continuity on a brutal scale. We were the ones who drove some of them to the edge of silence, and we decided, late but not too late, that perhaps it was worth stopping. There is still time in many places, not in all of them, but in many. When an otter returns to a river, something else returns with it. When it reappears in an urban estuary, the message is that water can improve. When it begins again to control urchins along a coast, the message is that the underwater forest can still be reborn. When an orphaned pup manages to join a wild population, the message is that loss does not always have the final word. They hold each other's paws while sleeping in the open ocean, so they don't drift apart. We are back at the beginning. The image has not changed, but now it no longer means the same thing. We are no longer seeing only a sweet scene. We are seeing shared warmth. We are seeing strategy against drift. We are seeing social bonds. We are seeing vulnerability. We are seeing intelligence. We are seeing an animal that holds up far more than it appears to. The moon falls on the water. The raft rises and falls with the breathing of the ocean. One otter holds a stone on its chest. Another holds its pup. Around them, kelp moves beneath the surface like a forest that breathes. Everything seems small, but it is not. Because in that small floating group there is something immense. There is evolutionary memory. There is a food chain in balance. There is carbon that does not get released. There are fish finding shelter. There is a history of destruction and rescue. There is a pending decision about the kind of world we want to leave alive. If we protect the otter, we will not only be saving an endearing animal, we will be defending clean rivers, healthy coastlines, underwater forests, complete trophic webs, and a form of beauty that also sustains function. We will be protecting a relationship between species, algae, currents, climate, and time. And perhaps that is the most extraordinary thing of all, that something so soft, so playful, so apparently fragile, can carry a stone on its chest and, at the same time, hold up a part of the ocean, that something so small can matter so much, that minimal gesture of two paws intertwined in the night is not just tenderness, but balance, but resistance, but life.